and gentlemen, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Hi!
We may be, a bit out of shape, but we're getting back into shape. Mostly to blame, that's for me, but nevertheless, and...
I think the both of us.
Perhaps. But, nevertheless. So, not too long ago, and we also put up the episode already, feel free to check it out, we interviewed a friend of ours that we met at Southern Methodist University.
Party foul.
Yes. When we were attending said university. His name is Jonathan Hodges, but perhaps you know him as Bomethius, and we wanted to take a deep dive both into the album Seasons of Limbo, which released this year, 2021, and we also wanted to interview him, and you can check out that interview wherever else you're hearing this episode as well. Now, Seasons of Limbo.
But he especially said Bandcamp, because Bandcamp is the way that he gets the most money from the music.
For sure. So yes, if you want to listen to the interview, it's probably on the same feed that you're hearing this. Mm-hmm. And then, yes, if you want to listen to the album Seasons of Limbo and the rest of his music, you can find it wherever you find your music. But if you want to support him best, it is via Bandcamp. Now, Mac, I know you were wanting to interview Jonathan because we have known him for a few years.
Yeah.
And I am so happy also that we did interview him because he is such a fascinating young man.
And just brilliant. I mean, the smartest guy.
Astoundingly so.
Yeah. I think I texted you immediately after and was like, I was unaware that he was at that level. And
not to be like an indictment of like we were expecting him to be like foolish or anything like that. At all. But it's a sort of wonderful feeling, and it takes a bit of humility to feel this. But it's nice whenever you're in a room with somebody and they make you actively feel like you're dumb, but not in the sort of degrading way, not in the sort of you're dumb. It's the sort of
exciting.
Like, I am just so well researched as a human being that you can't help but just sink your teeth into the knowledge that somebody carries, right?
Absolutely.
And so Jonathan Bomethius exuded that so much. So I did find it very much so a pleasure to have interviewed him.
I agree. I agree tenfold. Now, what were you going to get into?
Well, what I did want to ask you is that, so this is your pick.
Uh-huh.
This selection.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask you from the forefront, what made you choose this album, I suppose, at this time? Like, and then did you listen to the album first, or did you say, hey, let's actually review this, and then you listen to the album? What was your selection process like in terms of picking Seasons of Limbo?
I gotta say that So Jonathan and I had been talking a little bit about, like, maybe we could work something out. Maybe he could get on the podcast. Maybe we could interview him, because I knew that would just be such a fun interview, and that would be such a good time. We'd all have a good time there. And that was the case. But I didn't really know if we were going to actually review something of his. I had no idea at first. But I did know quite a bit of his work already, and I knew that it was at the level, and he had enough practice to where I felt pretty comfortable. I felt pretty comfortable reviewing his stuff.
Yeah.
Because it would be very awkward if we got in here and we were like, yeah, so that guy we talked to last week.
Awful, trash. Oh my God, it's the worst.
Kind of a poor musician.
My ears bled.
Yeah, exactly. But I knew that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
I knew that wouldn't be the case because first of all, he's just such a talented musician outside of the music that he makes under the name of Bomethius, but also the albums that he has released already, I had looked through or listened to and really enjoyed. As well as I knew that he had been sending out talking about all the different critics that had talked about him,
right,
or like different reviews that he had gotten that were pretty like high praise, and I was like, oh dang, this kid's really picking up steam. So yeah, I did not listen to Seasons of Limbo beforehand, but I knew that it was definitely something I wanted to pick because I trusted him and his music making abilities.
And so this also is not the first album that we've reviewed on this show. It's once again another album that Mac has selected, and once again, I'm very much so glad after the fact that he did select this one. And each album has been, different in one way or another, but what I loved so much about this in particular was the clear labor of love that this album exhibits, right?
Sure.
And there's something very cozy. Cozy is a funny word, but cozy about the fact that a lot, if not the vast majority, if not the entire album, was recorded in his bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And then anything that was done by different musicians, perhaps he did in the same space or he had them send it in, right? So, for example, one of them was somebody that we know, Travis Carroll, right? Who provided his wonderful guitar skills. Then there's, a saxophone and All I'll Need, right? So, but what's so clear and so beautiful about it is, it's a lot more intimate, right? So there isn't an insane production quality to this album, right? You listen to the other albums that we reviewed. You listen to Pony. You listen to Mad Villainy. You listen to Folklore as well. You're not going to get the same level of production, right? But it's a different expectation. And so then what reads so much clearer is, and not saying the other albums didn't achieve this, but what reads so much clearer is, I want to do this. There's a sense of
hunger.
There's a hunger for it, and I want to actively put this out there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, could he have sat on all 11 of these songs and really fine-tune them production quality-wise? For sure. Yes, but there's something beautiful about the fact that, okay, this is it in the moment, and what we learned during the interview as well, and what I also definitely appreciate is that how he treats his artist name Bomethius as a project title as opposed to an identifier.
Yeah. Right?
That he is working under the guise of Bomethius, and Bomethius is the exploration of himself, and that's just how he approaches his work.
Yeah.
And then there's also the fact of that he releases an album each year.
Yeah.
But he doesn't treat them as finished projects per se, because I mean, as artists, right? If we try to start a project and then finish it to the utmost degree, it's going to take so incredibly long for us to even come close to finishing it, period, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we think about a multitude of artists that there are year-long gaps in between albums, right? Because they have to fine-tune everything. They may release a mixtape or an EP,
and that's
here
dozens
and there.
of people working on the album.
Exactly, and perhaps a single, right? But there is so much fine-tuning that goes into it. So then what I enjoy so much is not necessarily the lack of fine-tuning, because that's whatever. That's just a sort of byproduct of what occurs. But it's sort of this is me in the moment. This is me in the now. This is where I am in terms of growth.
It feels like a checkpoint.
Exactly.
or a little bit of a photo album. Yeah, something that he was talking about a bunch throughout the interview that I so appreciated, and I mean, it seems like the biggest note he had for himself, as well as the biggest note that I had for the album, was the fact that he is absolutely ready to get in a studio.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's poor production quality or its poor sound quality, but you can tell it was made in a bedroom, or that it was made in a house. And that's not to its detriment necessarily.
No, I mean, it could be treated as part of the charm, or it could be treated as an indictment if you wanted to, right?
Right. Depending on what you're looking for. Exactly. Yeah, and so the thing that I so enjoyed about it is, I mean, in our interview, whenever he said not just I really want to get in a studio, but or I need to get in a studio, but I feel like I've done everything that I can do from my bedroom.
And it feels like it's
pretty true.
The next step for him, in terms of progression as an artist, in terms of growth.
Unless he became a DJ or an audio editor. In terms of as a musician, he has done what he can do in a bedroom. It is time for him to grow and get into a studio.
And I think so much so that when you look at this album as a stepping stone, when you look at this album as once again like a piece of a staircase, right? Just another step on a staircase, and it's this upward trajectory of the growth that is Jonathan Hodges's Bomethius, right? When you look at it like that, I think it paints the album in a much better light, right? Because honestly, by itself, I think the album is good, but it's nothing to be like, whoa, right? And that's just me. And also, it's not like I'm gonna have the words to properly describe why that is, because I'm not that well versed in music. And if I had Jonathan behind me, he could probably maybe describe for me, hey, you're probably feeling this way because of A, B, and C. And I'd be like, sure, yes, thank you so much. But I do not have that vocabulary, so you're just, what I'm armed with is just my experience, right? And maybe it's because of the folk nature of this album. Maybe it's the sort of how it's not necessarily all the lyrics are the same, but a lot of the songs take this sort of a similar exploration in terms of existentialism and this contrast and this juxtaposition between like really dark and depressing lyrics to the backing of very hopeful, fun music, you know? And so then when you approach Where Are My People, then it's a true treat, because it's just like, oh, there is something very hopeful about this now.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't have to like hide this anymore. But with that being said, still, it's really exciting to look at this album as a piece of growth material and see where else can it go. And maybe this is a sizzle serve, and if you don't know, our sizzle serves here, we don't call them hot takes, we call them sizzle serves. And maybe my sizzle serve here is the fact that the one song that I think you can really sort of speculate where the growth is going to come from, or I'm just really intrigued by what next steps he would take from this song, would actually be the intro to Nothing. So every single song on this album is its own individual song, right? Then you have track number 6, smack dab in the middle of the album. It's this 30-second intro to the song that's that goes right after it, right? But what intrigued me so much, and I guess it plays into the next step for Bomethius as well, is the production quality of that intro. That it felt like, so what the intro starts with is there's this like radio static, and then it drowns out into some vocals, and then drowns into some more instrumentation. And so it makes me really curious about, like, it feels like he's dipping his toes into something different, right? Where there's a certain sound that is accompanied by the entirety of this album, right? Yeah. And so then hearing the intro to Nothing, it makes me curious, what other sounds can he do? Yeah. You know, and so, like I said, it's dipping that toe, and it makes me ever more curious about, so then what happens if he dives headfirst into something that's completely unknown? Yeah, you know, so like what is the unknown for Bomethius? And I think that's so much of the excitement from this album, that if you look at it, like I said, as a stepping stone, then it feels like the possibilities are sort of endless for his growth, as opposed to, because you can look at Mad Villainy, right, by MF Doom and Madlib, as a sort of quintessential perfect peak album, right? Yeah. But if you treat it as a growth album, then you think to yourself, where else could they grow? Right. You know, but if you treat this album not necessarily as Bomethius's peak album, but as his growth album, then your mind, it is very exciting. Right. Your mind wanders into just the endless possibilities. So it's and then you get a certain appreciation for other songs like All I'll Need, like Traffic, like Where Are My People. Yeah. What else can he do?
There's also something so unique about this album that, and it didn't really dawn on me until you were just talking, that most of the artists that I can think of that I really, really enjoy, they can't replicate 100% the sounds that they make on the album live. You know what I mean? Like whenever they do their live performances, they have to edit things or refocus them to make them conducive to a live performance. Yeah.
And whatever that means. You know, it could be a numerous multitude of factors, but yeah.
Exactly right. And so what's something that's interesting about this album, and pretty much all the music that Bomethius has made, is that if you were to get the right musicians together, it would be you could make it sound exactly like this, but live.
Sure.
And that's I think something that will be interesting to see next album, because just like you said with the Nothing intro, I feel like you won't be able to do that with the next album. That's just my inclination. I feel like by the next album he will have made sounds that you cannot reproduce live, because he will have the resources to experiment with sounds like the sounds we heard in Nothing intro.
Mm-hmm. So would that be to you? Would that then be a benefit?
That would be sound effects. That would be like big storytelling, imaging, things like that.
Sure.
That would make a difference. I think that would be really cool.
And treating the record, the album, less of a sort of live performance that was put, you know, onto some sort of recording device,
it does sound
and
like
more
that.
so into like, this is a piece of art. And not. Oh, let me walk back. Hold on.
Right.
No. Let me walk back a few steps. Because then I just sort of implied that this is not a piece of art.
Get the ladder, climb out of the grave.
Oh no. This. I am not trying to imply that this is not a piece of art, but I want to hone in on the storytelling effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That when you do open yourself up to these more options, then you do open yourself up to more crazy storytelling that you can't normally do if it was a live performance.
Yeah.
Because then it wouldn't be fun, or it wouldn't read well as a live performance. And sometimes, like, the best records could be very much so that it's like some of the songs on there are not best for live performance. There are so many albums that have interludes, talking interludes in them. Why? You know, like, but like, because why in the sense of nobody's going to perform them live.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to do that live. Why would people want to go to a concert and hear a conversation live? That's just theater. They're not going for theater. They're going to see somebody perform a concert, some music, right? But it's part of the storytelling of the album, of the record. And so then, yes, I think, once again, it's another one of those possibilities that does make your mind wander as to what other storytelling now beats could Bomethius do in his next records. And perhaps because what it is that so far these records have been like pieces of music that have been put together and part of this year-long project, right? But that doesn't necessarily inherently mean that all these songs are really connected with one another, right? There is a lack of cohesion, which is fine. Not every record needs to be that. You know, I'm not trying to like pigeonhole and like put this sort of album into a box, right? But it makes me curious of like, I really enjoy this album, but I want to see something different because I just want to see what that would be like.
Yeah. It feels like a majority of the songs that he's ever written are more idea-driven than story-driven. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's starting to experiment more in this album with stories.
Right. But it's the idea and then it births stories. Like, I mean, the best example is Tornadoes in Dallas.
Yeah. He talked about philosophy a lot in the interview, and that's clearly where he starts. Yeah. You know, that's clearly where his core is, which is good, which is absolutely good. But there are some really interesting, just like Tornadoes in Dallas, I totally agree, where you start with an idea or a philosophy or something that he wants to say, and then all of a sudden he's now having to tell a story to get that point across, which is, I think, how some of the most focused music is made. And I use that word focus specifically because it's something that I was thinking a lot about after the interview that we had with him, purely because of Jacob Collier. Because we talked about him for just a second.
Right. Now, Mac, who is Jacob Collier?
Jacob Collier is a musician, a British musician that is mainly famous for like bedroom music, as just like Bomethius, and he has like two like world class string playing parents, and like got lessons from Herbie Hancock growing up, which is one of the best musicians in the world, and he's just this prodigy, right? And he has done a bunch of amazing stuff, but he's someone that I love with all my heart. And it's someone that a lot of musicians, including Bomethius, simply do not like. And it's not like they hate him, it's just that they don't prefer him and they don't understand why people are freaking out. Like everyone's like, oh, he's revolutionizing music, and they're like, I mean, not really, if you think about it.
That like somebody could have done this a while ago. He's just choosing to do it now.
Right. And
or that's the argument. I'm not saying that's what I think.
Even more importantly, and the thing that got under my skin is that people could have done this a while ago, but they didn't for a reason. And he's like, he's actively like falling into all the traps that musicians knew that you'd fall into if you made the decisions that he's making musically.
Such as?
Well, I want to get into it.
Oh.
Afterward from our sponsor.
Oh, nice work.
Like that tease? All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And welcome back to the Artenders. So, we left off with Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier is someone that I love, someone that Bomethius dislikes a bit, and same with a lot of musicians that I know. A lot.
He doesn't get the big idea of Jacob Collier.
He doesn't.
Overrated. Get him out of here, buddy.
Yeah, take a walk.
Yeah, kick rocks.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
We're starting to dip into that baseball thing.
Which baseball thing?
The cut of the grass.
Oh, the cut of the grass. Oh, the crack of the bat. Oh, ain't nothing like a good old baseball game. Bat. Oh, Cracker Jack's 7th inning stretch. Sorry. So Mac, you were speaking of Jacob Collier.
Yeah.
You know, he typically bats a pretty nice batting average, constantly bringing in runners from scoring position. But
I think he's batting a good 314.
But we have Bomethius over here, and he believes that he's actually an overrated player. When you look at the advanced analytics and look at the WAR of Jacob Collier, he's a bit overrated. He's actually shooting kind of low, below average throughout the rest of the league. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, funny enough, I'll actually phrase it in sports.
Oh God.
Musicians, especially Bomethius.
2 people will get this.
I know. Actually, no.
Okay, 3.
I'll explain. Yo, you know. All 3 of them.
Yes.
He's a volume shooter. Jacob Collier is. In that he lacks focus. What I mean by that, whenever Jacob Collier makes music, a lot of the times he will add sounds or add music theories that are not necessary. And that is what makes his music sound so explosive and eclectic. And that is what people revere him as, or revere him for, and put him on this pedestal for, is that he's bringing all of these new sounds into the forefront of music, which is true. Objectively, it is true.
And that's the focus of the exploration.
Exactly.
It's the exploration of sound, not the exploration of story or
exactly. Lyricism. And that's why musicians hate him. Because if you actually know what you're doing, you're making every single decision within your music for a purpose. And Jacob Collier simply is not.
And those are not bad decisions.
No.
But
it's not for the sake of the story or for the sake of the song itself or the idea.
Right.
Whereas clearly, like we were talking about, clearly Bomethius, whenever he's writing music, he knows what he wants to say, and then everything comes after that.
Yeah. So then songs kind of write themselves in a way. So like,
and that's how it's supposed to go for songwriters.
Yeah. Perhaps.
Or usually that is how it goes for especially lyric-driven songwriters. But Jacob Collier just simply doesn't give a shit about that. Yeah. And so it results in a really, really cool revolutionary sounds, but a lack of focus. And that is something that I think that Bomethius has plenty of.
Yes.
Is focus. And that is why I am most excited for what is going to happen in his career.
Yeah.
Because he has an amount of focus and an amount of knowledge, and the combination of focus and knowledge is going to make him stand out from every other songwriter making music right now.
Yeah.
And that's what excites me. That's what makes me go, I think that we're talking to someone that's about to be very big for what he does.
I think so too. And I think it's in terms of focus, it's the focus to me on a song by song basis.
Yeah.
Right? And so let's go back to Tornadoes in Dallas, right?
Yeah,
Where
sure.
this was a song that was written a day or two after Tornadoes touched down in Dallas. And so then it's this immediate reaction. It's once again a song that's writing itself. That's once again how it was originally recorded, was in like a hallway at the university, right? And so like I said, it's that intense focus of the moment in terms of the subject matter.
Yeah.
Right? And so the entirety of this song is coming from a place of hurt, a place of love, a place of just this sort of amazement at devastation and whatever in terms of amazement means to you, right? There are multiple definitions of amazement in this context, right?
Yeah.
But so then it's
like
that,
in the Bible, like a biblical amazement.
right. But it's that intense focus of the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's less about the exploration of sounds, like Jacob Collier. It's more about the exploration of the moment. It's more about the exploration of like, what am I feeling right now? What am I experiencing right now? And once again, Traffic, another great example. Traffic, what a wacky song. The more I listen to Traffic, the more I enjoy it. It's the first song off the album, and it's kind of jarring because once again, it's another great example of a piece from this album where you have these dark lyrics juxtaposed by very happy melodies, and then, somebody is dying. So,
Yeah, right.
but that's another great example of he told us this story as well, where he was driving down the highway and somebody cuts him off and he's bleeping all expletives, and then not even 5 minutes later he sees a car to the side that suffered from a car crash, and he has no idea if the person is alive or if they're dead, etc. And so but it's what that song comes from is that moment.
Yeah.
Right. It's the exploration of the moment, and
Yeah.
so then it's that sort of exploration from Bomethius of like, who am I right now? And so then, because of who am I right now, what are the songs that I'm making right now?
Yeah.
And so then it offers this experience, and we talked about it once again in the interview, that it's sort of, this album is a time capsule, and that's where I think kind of the album succeeds the most. Mm-hmm. It's when it is this time capsule, and then because not only is it a time capsule in terms of the development of Jonathan's music, it's a time capsule of the experience of the moment.
Yeah.
And you can't say that about every artist, right? Because there's so many songs out there, beautiful songs. Some of our favorite songs are not necessarily about the experience of the moment that's happening right then and there to that individual, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm looking at the track list, and so much of it is. Traffic is about experience of the moment. Goodbye COVID-19, Tornadoes in Dallas, All I'll Need, Where Are My People? It's all of those about the moment that he is experiencing vividly, and that he is putting to the page, and that he is putting to the microphone as well. And so that is what makes this album absolutely beautiful, and that is what makes me so excited about the future of him. And so it's like, okay, so because when you're an artist, you always start with what you know, right?
Yeah.
Great example, The Wire, where Ed Burns and David Simon started with what they know, and guess what? It was fantastic. And guess what? This is fantastic because Jonathan is sticking to what he knows. So then, once again, it makes me ever the more curious, what will happen when he dives into the pool?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? What is that going to sound like?
Yeah.
What's going to be the sort of record? What would there ever be a Bomethius record, or would it be under a different title, even if maybe the entire album is one story, if the entire album was one cohesive experience about multiple experiences tied together by the final song?
Yeah.
Once again, the questions are endless.
Yeah, he should take a page from Logic's book. Because that's what Logic does. It's like makes a like album story. But
Sure, but even, or at least I always refer to this album. I referred to it when we talked about Folklore. Kendrick Lamar's second album, Good Kid, Mad City. It is one cohesive story.
That's good.
And I love it. But I also like love that album for what it is, and I don't want every album to be that album.
Yeah.
You know, like my favorite album, even like that one's number 2, but then my favorite album is Daft Punk's Discovery. And that is not necessarily a cohesive story. Somehow they made a cohesive story of it in Interstellar 5555. But
if I was to give one big note to this album, other than what we've talked about already,
sure.
It would be that it sounds like he has gotten comfortable. Like he's very comfortable in throughout this album.
Yeah.
And not that he's like talking about easy things.
I gotta stop you right there.
Yeah?
Because there's a motorcyclist that just passed us by that like really wanted to show off.
It was just like, look
at me.
I heard they were doing a podcast and I want to be involved.
Yes. I want to
was.
be a part of this.
He was.
And he was. Good for him.
So, yeah, I feel like he has gotten a bit comfortable.
Okay.
Like he has found a sound that he knows how to produce
And works.
and works really well.
Yeah.
And so I will be interested to see if he, just like we said, like if what happens if he starts doing things that he simply does not know, if he has to push himself. And he was even talking in the interview, that's something that is like a consistent theme in his life, right? Is that he always feels like he is extremely accelerated. And in being extremely accelerated, it's hard to because really all of the pushing that you are doing, you have to do it to yourself. No one else is going to push you to be better than where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's super scary too.
Yeah.
But it makes you curious, like when you listen to All I'll Need and when you hear that saxophone, you're like, this is different.
Right. But like I simply don't know enough about music, and I don't know many people that I've met in my life that do know enough about music to tell him what the next step would be. But I think he's ready for that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So he is going to have to push himself to do it.
Yeah.
But he's ready.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Yeah.
Another thing that that you talked about for just a moment with the whole storytelling aspect, and something that really aided in the experience of this album, was his stories behind some of the songs and getting that context.
Yeah.
And I want to really harp on that word context, because that in my mind was the thing that affected this album for me the most, was whenever we were sitting in our interview, not just the stories that he gave us, but whenever he said, or whenever we all kind of came to the realization together that his album is really all about context. Like, he's not going to be able to pick one of these songs to be the one that plays on the radio, because all of them need the context of the rest of the album.
Yeah.
And partially in terms of story, but mainly in terms of musicality and in terms of like the themes that he's using, the sounds you need all together. Like that's how it was written, which makes sense. But I would go even further than that. Whenever we started talking about that, I was then inspired to go back and just, because I do a lot of driving around, I have to drive all the time. While I was in the car, I started listening to just all of his stuff from the beginning. Everything that I could find of his before I listened to this, and then I listened to this. And just like we said, that aided tremendously. Not just because it was cool seeing the stepping stones, but because of the context.
Oh, can you press on that a little more? How did it aid tremendously? Was it because you could hear, you could listen to the growth of like the exploration of how he approached his music? What was it in particular?
A little bit, yeah, but also I just learned a lot about him. I felt, and I think that might be why I am saying that he seems comfortable, is because, not because I felt like I was listening to the same song, because no two songs are the same with him.
No.
That's not what I mean at all.
They may be similar sounding, quote unquote, but that's because they're using the same instruments or similar instruments.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with his songwriting abilities. No. Yeah, and I think that the more that I listened to him, the more I was like, oh, like he's put out a lot of stuff. Yeah. And it's all pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
And that's
not easy.
Not easy at all.
You don't expect an artist to always hit, you know?
But like I started to learn a lot about his music interests and the themes that he enjoys using the most, and the styles that he gravitates towards, and the choices that he gravitates towards. And so by the time I got to Seasons of Limbo, I was like, oh, there's Jonathan again, you know what I mean? Because I learned so much about him through the choices that he made in music or songwriting prior. Yeah, and that was just cool. And I never really thought that would make much of a difference. But seeing the first album where it's not like he's clearly not pushing himself further than I just want to get an album out because it's my first.
Right.
You really get his raw instinct.
Yeah.
That is an instinct album, I would call it. And it's cool to see how like what he does different in the next one, and knowing now that is not his instinct. That is not what he is comfortable with. But now we've grown to a point where he is now fully comfortable, and it's time to go on to the next. To go back to your, because you had like a stair step analogy in the first part.
Sure. Yeah.
To go back to that, it does feel like each album he has like taken a step up the staircase, but he has reached the second flight, and it's time for him to start up the next flight of stairs to the third floor.
Gotcha. So like you think sort of you were speculating that
he has hit the precipice of this sound.
Yes. He has hit this peak of Bomethius.
And
like
it's time to go to
this
floor 3.
particular mountaintop.
Yeah, it's time to go to floor 3.
Now it's time for a brand new mountain to hike for Mr. Bomethius.
Yes.
So then, you know what? Let's dip into this conversation. This crazy conversation that we are totally having without Jonathan Hodges. That we are having
Reckless
without
speculation.
Bomethius.
Love it.
Is it time to get rid of the tag? Is it time to get rid of the title? Bomethius then?
Oh, man.
Mac?
No.
Okay.
No. No. And we talked about it in the interview a little bit.
No, but yeah.
I'm going to explain it as a big setup for a nothing answer.
Yeah, it's like, okay, sure, yeah.
Oh, and moving on.
Because I agree.
Yeah. I mean, he
It's a
does
project
need
name.
to.
It's a project title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he does need to finish that story. But actually, even if he does get to the point where he has fully confronted himself or fully like fleshed out the idea of like Bomethius being his younger self. Let's say that he makes 50 albums. Who gives a shit? Let's say he does it for the rest of his life. And like by album 20, he's already like done everything he can with the Bomethius idea. Everything he does after that, just like we said, requires maybe even the context of Bomethius.
That's true. I think a good example, and for those of you who don't know, once again, calling back to previous episodes, but like, so MF Doom, for example, he's not just MF Doom. There's one, maybe 2 albums that he's like King Ghidorah, right? But you don't know much about that unless you have the context that he is actually the same person, right? And so then when you look at it through that context, then it's a lot more intriguing to see, okay, so then why did he name himself differently? What's this exploration? Yeah, et cetera, as opposed to just looking at it as one singular piece.
But it's a specific decision that he made, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
MF Doom.
Yes.
Yeah. And I actually would be thrilled to hear a different Jonathan.
Yeah. So then,
Or
like,
to hear just a Jonathan Hodges.
to hear Jonathan Hodges, or to hear just, I don't know, Cupcake Magoo. Like, what does Cupcake Magoo sound like?
Cupcake Magoo's the one. I think it has to be Cupcake Magoo.
I think he should don that moniker, Cupcake Magoo.
Man.
If
What
anything,
type of music would Cupcake Magoo make?
Oh, but something bubbly, something fun.
Yeah.
But there's something very dark and
Well, because
sinister with
there
it.
is a cupcake
Yeah.
artist, and that artist Cupcake makes mostly songs that you furiously twerk or fuck to.
Okay. Wow. All right. Oof, that's an
It's like
NSFW, my
really, it's really, really aggressive.
Listen. But the point being is that, like,
So it's like to put the train back on the tracks.
sure. So we're just speculating here, but we are just asking the question into the universe, and not giving answers, even though we should give answers because that's always more exciting to listen to. But fuck you. Is that how much is the name Bomethius holding Jonathan Hodges back, if at all, as an artist?
That is an interesting way to phrase it. I would say definitely not.
Because let's say
Yeah.
his next album, like, I'm not saying he's done with Bomethius, but let's say in his next album he just dons Cupcake Magoo or whatever silly nickname, right? I'm not saying Bomethius is a silly nickname, although it's a nickname that happens to be silly. It's not a silly nickname. What would that do? would that do anything to his development, to his growth, to the exploration of his next album?
Oh, like,
would
that...
he still release an album the next year?
Uh-huh.
Would he then actually sit on an album? Would he experiment a lot more with instrumentations that he's not comfortable with? Would he collaborate with a lot more artists, or maybe no artists at all? What would that do, right? Because he's treating Bomethius as a project title.
Mm-hmm.
So then what is Bomethius doing for him? And then what would Bomethius no longer be doing for him?
Yeah.
But it makes me curious. And once again, it is leading to that next step. It's leading to the question of where else can he go? And that's the exciting part for this artist.
I agree. So I am curious, Danny, where would you place this in terms of how you felt about the album in comparison to other albums that we've reviewed, or maybe just other music that you consume just on average in your life? Was it something that you felt like you were going out of your way to listen to because it was a friend of ours, or is it actually on the same plane as really world scale, internationally acclaimed professional music?
There is no way that this can be considered world scale because of the production quality, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure.
That's just kind of like how it is, but that doesn't make it world scale quality in terms of the music itself, right?
Sure.
Right. And so like as an album, then we can use the indictment of the production quality isn't really there.
So
right?
If you were to give the exact same album to a producer, like a world scale producer, it would be a world scale album.
I think so
too.
I think so. I really genuinely think so.
Yeah.
Once again, but also part of the charm of the album is the fact that it's not world scale production.
Yeah.
That it is a lot more intimate of a piece, right?
Kind of reminds me of Jimmy Lawson.
Yeah, I do not know the reference you were making.
Jimmy Lawson is this like guy that he's like best friends with Ed Sheeran or whatever, but he has refused. He's always stayed indie, and he always records all of his stuff in one take, and it's cool. Like he does really cool stuff.
It's different. So that's like I said, you get this level of intimacy that you don't get in Pony. You don't get in Mad Villainy, right? You don't get that there. What you do get in those albums is like a much higher production quality, but you do get the intimacy in Seasons of Limbo, and you also get it in Folklore as well because of how that album was produced as well. That's also another album that was done in multiple bedrooms, you know? And so it's like, of course, it is apples and oranges, but because it's also not necessarily fair because Mad Villainy is a peak album, but this is a growth album.
Yeah.
I would also consider Folklore to be a growth album, and I would dare so far as to say maybe Pony is a peak of one version of Rex Orange County. You know? So it's once again it's apples and oranges, but when it comes to listening to something and then anticipating the future and being curious about the future, no album and hardly anything that we've achieved on the show has done that to the degree of this, right? Yeah. And perhaps that is also because we know the feller, you know?
The feller. Right.
I'm old. We know the feller. We know the lad. We know the fellow. And so perhaps that's playing into it. And perhaps it's because we also interviewed him, right? But understanding that context, even so, it's still really exciting to see where this album can go. And so it's not so much about the album itself. It's a lot more to me about what the album represents. And that's what I love about it.
I agree.
What are your final thoughts, your final takeaways?
I think it's clearly worth a listen. And partially just because I love the artist as a person. I think that he is just so worthy of a bigger platform. But also, it's fantastic music. It's really good stuff. I wish that it got to the point of I wish that there were a few more easy listens, things that I could put on like just as I'm thinking about something else. Because it is think heavy music, but that's I don't think that's a problem though. I think that he should keep making the types of music that he's making in terms of the thoughtfulness. Because I mean, clearly that's what interests him, and that's what's going to keep him going for the rest of his life. So yes, I would say please listen to it. Please give it a try. The guy's stellar, and you can find him anywhere at Bomethius on all social media platforms, and he has a freaking hilarious TikTok. So go look at that. Even though he only has like 6 TikToks, they're hilarious. So please go look at that. With that being said, Danny, what are we consuming next week? Oh, nice.
Oh God, I don't know if you saw. For
You're
those
like holding
of you,
that cough for a while.
I was clenching my teeth.
You're doing a good job though. Thank you for
so
letting me get it out.
Oh my God, that was so difficult.
I should have been a better co-host.
I know, but I knew I could
squeeze that
survive,
faster.
so I wasn't too stressed. If it
Okay.
was getting to the point, then I would have definitely been like, wrap this up, right?
Brighten the cough.
So here's the thing. Context once again. So when Mac and I started this podcast, we our first episode that you can listen to, whatever platform you're on, is Seven Samurai. But if you notice, is that in the description, it's listed as number 2, and we've listed every single piece,
God.
right, in order, correct?
Yeah.
Except for the interviews. Now you may be wondering, so what is number 1? What is the first episode? Well, we did have a first episode.
Yeah.
Actually, we had an episode 0, but
We did have an episode 0,
But
and
we're not
one.
going to visit that right now.
We're not going to visit episode 0?
No. We're actually going to visit episode 1.
We are?
Yes. So even though we've already technically reviewed this episode, it is more than likely you've never heard this episode. So we're going to look at it again, and honestly, because this movie is amazing and everybody should watch it, and I fucking just love this movie. Mac, we're going to discuss next week Remember the Titans.
Fuck you.
I love this movie.
Oh, God, that's going to be exciting. Okay, sweet.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it again.
I'm happy to watch it again.
Oh my goodness.
Thrilling. Thank you, then. Thank you for that.
Ain't no mountain high enough.